There's a story that is told in Luke chapter 13. After Jesus is busy ministering, there are a group of people gathering around him, and they ask him, Jesus, did you hear about the Galileans whose blood was mixed and Pilate served it? You know, were those people bad? What was wrong with them that they deserved such a fate? And Jesus says to them, what about those 18 that died in the tower of Siloam that fell over? Do you think that they were more unrighteous than you who are asking these questions? And Jesus, in order to meet this challenge or this question that they ask, he tells them a story of a fig tree. It's wonderful how the fig tree always participates in Jesus' story. And it's now fig season, so I hope that you can identify with what Jesus was saying here. He tells of this fig tree that is on a piece of land, and the owner would come to this fig tree and would receive no fruit. The first year, nothing. The second year, nothing. The third year, nothing. And he goes and he says to the handyman or the gardener, he says, cut out. Am I still audible? Okay. No, there's a little bit of a... Okay. He goes on, testing. He goes on to say, cut out this tree. It yields no fruit. 3 years I've come to it, no fruit. And what does the gardener say? Let it be. Let it be. That's a beautiful phrase that is used there, because within it encapsulates patience. And he says to the owner, give me 1 year, and I will tend to this tree, and I will, and that is the words, actual words that is used, I will dirty my hands with manure in order to tend to this tree. Basically, I will get my hands dirty for the sake of this tree. Now, many that were listening there had an incredible knowledge of the Torah. And especially when it came to Leviticus. And it speaks about coming to a land and you are planting fruit trees. And it speaks in Leviticus 19 verse 23. And I only have an Afrikaans Bible here, but I'll tell you what it says there. It says that when you plant a tree, the first year, you don't even look if there's any fruit. The second year, you don't have any expectation towards this fruit. The third year, nothing. In the fourth year, if there are fruit, you're not allowed to eat of it. It's an offering to the Lord. And only in the fifth year are you allowed to eat of that tree. So when Jesus was telling this parable, many in their minds was like, yes, this person, this owner is right. He said, cut out the tree after 3 years because there was no fruit. But you know, the one who was actually working with this tree every single day was the one who said, let it be. It's not yet its time. But I will work with it. I will nurture it. I will dirty my hands in order to ensure that when you come back and you have expectations, that they are met. He said, I will tend to it. I will nurture it. And Jesus was talking in the way in which we deal with people in that parable. Remember what was the question? Those ones who died so ugly. You know, what was wrong with them? What happened with them? And Jesus tells them this parable. And what I want us to just notice at this moment is that word, let it be, and the patience that accompanies that in the way in which we work with each other towards bearing of fruit. within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, there is something that is known as the back door. Have you heard of it? What is the back door phenomena that's taking place? If we baptize 10 people within the first year, how many of them leave again? 4. 40% of people leave this church again after the first year. Now, we need to ask ourselves, why does that happen? Because we've already established them in truth. They know about the Sabbath, they know about this, they know about that. They can give Bible studies if you leave them to it. Why then is this still happening? Now, we don't really recognize it because we are so prolific in winning souls. We do not recognize how many are leaving the back door because there's constantly people joining. But if we are to stand back and look over 5 years, we need to recognize that these churches need to sit full. And that brings us to the question, why is this happening? Now, I don't know if you can see there, but then let me read for you. Before we do that, I hope you didn't look. What is the major reason why people leave the church? People. Okay? People. Who would like to venture other guests? Guesses? Yes. Pastor Klaas. Don't have friends. Loneliness. Expectations. On that about loneliness, just a side fact. Research actually shows us that loneliness is more detrimental to our health than smoking. You can smoke and have friends and you're healthier than not smoking and being lonely. That's the impact of relationships in our lives. And when we look at the reasons with the research that has been conducted within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, why people leave, I take it the red one is the pointer. The perceived hypocrisy of members, the lack of friends within the church, high level of conflict within the local church, other family conflicts, conflict with other members, move to a new city, divorce, doubts about Advent. Only in 8th place do we find people not agreeing with doctrine as a reason for leaving the church. And that's why many people who leave the Adventist church don't join any other church. Because they know the truth. They won't feel comfortable. But when you find them at another church, you will find that they have friends there. They belong. They've gone through a divorce, and now they've actually found people that have a group for divorcees. And this brings us to the question about how do we work with each other? How do we relate to one another? And there's an illustration. Imagine you are a shepherd. And you have mastered the strategy of finding lost sheep. You know, you buy trucks that are installed with beautiful hay. You know, and you have advertising and you have the most effective strategy ever to get those sheep onto your truck and you take them to your farm. And you have them on this farm and you show them to the kraal. And as they walk into the kraal, there's a sheep, but when you look closer, it's actually a wolf with a sheep's clothing. When you look through, you see, but where's the back fence? There's no fence, it's only wide open. There's no roof. You know, the roof is just like waving in the wind, and you feel that it's going to fall on you when you walk through it. And that's oftentimes the way in which we operate. We have mastered the skill of getting people to accept Jesus Christ. As Seventh-day Adventists, I don't think there's other denomination that has the skills we have in evangelism. Where we sometimes lack is once the people are in the kraal. And the research shows it, the way in which we work with each other. Our nurturing needs to reflect our winning of souls. The impatience of the fig tree owner, expecting fruit instead of understanding where the tree is. He was actually in the wrong, because there was another 2 years before he could have some fruit of that tree. But the one who walked with the tree from small understood that there is probably another year before this tree will bear any fruit. And he didn't sit back and say, this is not my land. This is not my responsibility. He said, I'm going to dirty my hands. Even to the point of having manure stuck in my fingernails. But I'm going to do everything that I need in order for this tree to bear fruit. This brings us to what we can learn from Jesus. First of all, the program or disposition. Now the question we need to ask, when we think about membership retention, when we think about nurturing members, are we thinking in line of programs? Or are we thinking in line of a disposition that we cultivate within our church? If we do not have hearts that have a friendship with Jesus Christ, we are going to struggle to be friends to people. The way in which we're going to work with a person is always going to be in the way in which this owner came to the fig tree expecting something. And recognize how the gardener says to the owner, if you come back and there's no fruit, you cut it out. Reserving the judgment upon the tree for the one who's actually the owner of the tree. And that needs to teach us the way in which we work with each other. We are not to be the judges of where people ought to be. If we are a friend, we are walking with them. We can encourage them. We can get our hands dirty with them. But in the end of the day, we should not be the judges to say, this is where I expected you to be, but you are not there. So, I think we need to go to a new pasture. Look for new sheep. We need to recognize that the way in which we work with each other, and that way is how Jesus worked. The number one strategy for retaining members, the research shows us that a person will stay in the church if they make a friend within the first month. If they make a friend. Now, friendship, is it something that you can legislate? Can you legislate friendship? No. What is the beauty about friendship, friends? It's spontaneous. It takes time. Yes, there might be initial spark about something that you have in common, but as you grow together. You have experiences together. And the Bible shows us that this is the way in which Jesus worked. So Peter, having rejected Jesus goes, if you go and study John chapter 21 and you see the way in which Jesus comes to Peter, he goes back to the way in which he called Peter. It's exactly the same story again. And now he says to Peter, Peter, do you love me? And what does Peter say? Yes. What does Jesus say? Feed my sheep. Feed my sheep. And he goes through this and he establishes Peter again. He says, I will the work that you do as my disciples will establish the church. This is the means in which I am going to establish my church on this earth, is feeding the sheep. So if we've had the seminar about discipleship and how important it is within the church and mentorship and all these things, what Jesus is actually saying is, look at me as the good shepherd and emulate that. Then you are my disciple. Work with people as I worked with them. And you will do well. Because in that is friendship. I do not call you servants, but I call you my friends. It's only a friend that could have Peter ready to go back to fishing and know that Peter just needs to remember the path that they've walked. And Peter becomes one of the pillars within our church. So friends, what can we learn from Jesus? Friendship is essential for membership retention. So lastly, I've already touched on that. If we want to be disciples, we need to follow the example of the Good Shepherd in working with the sheep. Lastly, how does friendship work? We build trust. What's another word for trust? Faith. Faith and trust can be used interchangeably. It's the same Greek word. You can use that within the Bible. So when the Bible speaks about faith, you can put trust in there. And you will see how important that is for relationships. Because what's the essential dynamic for having a friendship? You can trust that person. What's the difference between a stranger and a friend? You don't share a mother. There's nothing that existentially connects you except that you value this friendship to the point of giving of yourself and expecting it to be dealt with trustworthily. That's the difference between having other relationships and having a friend. And that's why it's good to marry your friend. If you're still in courtship, that's just a side note. Make sure that you have a good friendship. My wife, is she here? She is here. I want to say, she was first my friend. And then when I recognized that, I feel a little bit more, it was easy to move to the next step of asking her to be, just my special friend. So build trust so that when somebody deals with you, they have hope. They walk away and they say, but, I look at my life and there's not much going on, but here I see something that will make me come back. And still hope in the way in which we work with each other. And lastly, nurture through love. And I take you to 1 Corinthians chapter 13 to see what love is. And then lastly, I've mentioned build trust, instill hope, nurture love. And 1 Corinthians 13 tells us faith, hope, and love. These will remain. That is how we keep our members. Thank you.